5:00, I had a family and a house. 5:02, it was over.
Everyone has had traumas in their life. Don't care what background you come from.
Authenticity is the sexiest thing in the world, right? Don't look at me. And then you looked at me, you go, when does it end? I wish I could tell you. Don't think it ever ends.
Today's guest has a studio in Dallas that's extremely well regarded for wellness. But that's not what's interesting about her. We had a conversation where I was vulnerable, and she let me into a space and guided me to a place where I felt so comfortable. And immediately I said, there's got to be more to this story. You just don't end up owning a wellness studio and being able to carry someone's emotions that well. So, Kalene McGraner, welcome to the Alex Perry on Fire podcast.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction. I'm happy to be here. That was so lovely.
I'm so interested to know how you get into a wellness space and bring that to life, because it just doesn't happen. You don't wake up and decide, I'm going to go into this space. So if you could please share with the audience a little bit of your story.
Thank you. Of course. Yeah, I will for sure say that ritual one was like divine intervention. Okay. I've been teaching yoga for a long time. I've always been active, an athlete, into wellness, into diet, meditation, but it's evolved over time. And so through teaching yoga at various studios here in town, I knew my partner. We kind of parallel played, right? We lived in the same area, kids, different schools. We taught at the same studios, but we didn't necessarily see each other on the daily, right? It was, but I could see her passion for wellness and all the work that she was doing for researching. And I admired it, but from over here. I'd always thought about having a yoga business or my own studio. And then a life event happened for me. And I thought, okay, I really want to do this. And I shared it with a friend of mine, a teacher at the studio who's fantastic and has been a mentor. And she said, this woman and this family, they want to do it too. You guys should join forces. And I showed up to a meeting right before the pandemic, in a challenging space, right? I think I hadn't washed my hair in a while. I had a t-shirt on that said some like billboard for who I thought I was at that moment. And I said, I really want to do this, but I want you to know, like, I'm in a life event and like, I'm accountable, I'm smart. And like, I know that you are too. And she said the same. I know we don't know each other that well. We know each other, but like, I think we should do this. And between the two of us, we can. And we absolutely did. In 1 year, we signed a lease on our space on Travis. We built our business in the back end in Aspen. It was when the world was shut down from nothing. I mean, we were like, what booking system do we use? The heaters, right? We knew we wanted hot. We knew we wanted a sculpt component. We knew we wanted more than yoga, but rooted in yoga. And then all of a sudden we come back, we're building this place out with residential grade stuff because supply chain was challenging. And now we look back at it and it makes me cringe. But, as we continue to build more, we get better and better. And, I look at it now, I had no idea that this would happen. No clue. We opened it thinking this would be a yoga clubhouse where we have exercise that we really like to condense our day. And what we have is a community of people. I just have no words. It's inexplicable. And so because we are yin to each other's yang and so opposite, but so much the same, it really reflects what we've created in the studio because so many opposites come in, right? And what I've noticed, you could have someone like yourself who's a professional business person and well-known in the community. You could have a single mom who's like barely putting food on the table, right? You could have an athlete, a criminal. I mean, I've got them all. And when they set all their stuff down and they go into that room, turn the lights down, we turn on the music, it's a friend of mine once said it's sufferfest. It's not a sufferfest, right? It's wearing down the walls in an environment where everyone's there to be better. And then before you know it, you look over and you're like, we're the same human. And you're like dapping someone up or giving them a sweaty hug. And then all of a sudden, I no longer have to explain what oneness is. It's very obvious. And so that has been the biggest gift. And I'm so grateful for it.
It's incredible. And I smiled as you said that because you're right. It's almost like in that hot space, you're putting down the mask. So everyone has an identity as they walk in the door, but it's lost as soon as you almost have to be, it's so hot, you have to be present, right? And you don't have to be. The whole idea is you try and be. But yeah, you're working out next to so many different people, but there's no identities in there. You're just your person in the studio working out.
You're a human. You're a human. And then to walk outside, right? And we don't lock the doors. We allow people to come out. And when people say so hot, I like cringe a little. I know that makes Nicole happy, but we are hot, but we have so many components in the room that give you the experience of struggle, but also of achievement. The workouts aren't designed to be achieved. Yoga, on the other hand, there is no achievement ever. It's a process. But the biggest thing is when people walk out and they're like outside on the patio and you see two people who you would never thought hanging out. Like when we first opened, we put cardio equipment out there because Nicole and I were like, well, what we do is we do cardio and then we go to yoga and then we sit in our sauna. 3 hours of our day are now gone. What we wanted was to condense it into one place. But then I saw the sweaty people going outside, sitting on the equipment, resting it. And I said, well, this is what they want. They want to go outside and hang out. So we pulled it all out. Elliot connected me with this turf guy. I had one of our decorators put some stuff out there. We have plants. People go out there, they lay down. They talk about being, it's just amazing to me to see people all get together and hang out. Like Dom's out there almost every morning. I see him when I pull in, just
my
shooting the breeze.
Family. You said a life event. Can you share what that was?
It still gets me, even though I'm, mostly healed, but I've had a few life events that were immediate change. And this particular one was, at 5 o'clock, I had a family and a house, 2 little kids, a dog, a wonderful, amazing husband. And at 5:02, it was over. And so there was a fair amount of time where, it was just a big change, but on purpose. And I'm grateful for it. But it still gets me because all I ever wanted as a child, I grew up with a single mom, a dad who's amazing now, but was addicted to his recovery. And so I essentially raised myself for a very long time. My mother taught English. She was a professor, PhD, and major American writers. So essentially, like Edgar Allan Poe and Anne Rice raised me because that's what I did. And so my biggest thing that I wanted was a nuclear family. That's what I wanted. And I had it. It was amazing, right? It was beautiful. We had everything until we didn't. And that's the way it goes. And I think that divorce is a blessing. I think that when you're in it, you can't see it. You're upside down. There are no borders or edges of understanding or clarity. So when you see people who go through big breakups or divorces or life changes, reality isn't necessarily as it is, what you really see. And so when you get away from it, and now I'm 5.5 years out, I see what a blessing it is. And I see how far we both have come in trying to co-parent, even though we're not in a nuclear family. And that life event led me to, within 1 year, open a business, build a house, and recreate myself. And it's given me agency to be who I always wanted to be, which is to march to the beat of my own drum. Social mores are important. Obviously, I live a good life and I have a moral code or, value system that I operate by, but I don't really care about what other people think. I don't really care what your last name is, Not that I ever did, but I think I had to pretend in order to fit a certain mold of the neighborhood I live in and the wife that I was and who I was married to and our children. And now I think I feel so free to be who I really want to be and to carry my dharma or my path. And I'm on it. It's amazing.
It's incredible. And you say 5 years. It's like that's enough time to look back and say, almost take a breath, even though it still hits you and be like, well, look where I've come from there. And would I have come from there if I stayed in that space? Do you think like there was a lot of illusion going on with because you had mentioned like I had my family, I had my husband, and I don't want to necessarily talk about the divorce, more of just this life that we aim for, right? And the society that we're in says, let's go for this. Let's have this body. Let's eat this way. Let's look this way. Let's have this family. And you said it like 5 o'clock one way, 5:02 another way. I've confided you in my breakup randomly, but obviously that was a space you could hold for me. I felt a lot like that too. I mean, there were signs, but I'm like, man, I was fine 1 minute. And when I say relatively fine, I was hiding what I might thought was fine in the most respectful way. You're living, you're being. Is it hard? I mean, did it take time for you to realize that maybe some of that was an illusion? If it was an illusion?
I was shown a mirror pretty quickly, right? It was an illusion. And there were signs along the way that both of us maybe knew, especially knowing that he was going one direction. I mean, he's a brilliant business person. He's a tremendous father, and he's still good to me, right? Even though we don't see each other every day. And I respect his life and his privacy, and he does the same for me. But in hindsight, I think about some of the signs. I think about some of my own behaviors, right? As a new mother who didn't have this experience growing up, I think that a lot of us tend to lean toward the kids. It's definitely necessary when they're babies and they're toddlers, right? I think that I thought, oh my gosh, the working will slow down. He'll, in his 40s, he'll come home to me more often, right? But, that was his choice, and it wasn't wrong. And me having those needs and wants of being seen and spend more time with weren't wrong either. But that I think that the frustration on both of our parts came out as attack, or it came out as criticism. And then over time, it just evolved, even though the years were amazing and then there were hard times. But, whenever we separated, I called the person that married us. It's an older gentleman who is a mentor to both of us. And I said, help me, you married us, like you're a family guy. Like, don't let this happen. Like, I'm controlling, I'm grasping,
Yeah.
I'm bargaining,
Yeah.
I'm doing it all. And he said, Kalene, how many people are in your marriage? He said, a marriage is 2 people, not 4. And right away, I knew it was meant to be, right? I knew, even though it sucked, even though still today, I think about what would have happened. It absolutely happened for both of us to go on and live our best life, to live our purpose. And, I loved being a wife. I know I'll be one again. And that's it. It was a great lesson. I had that. And now I have 2 amazing kids who I talk to openly about these things. And it's led me down a path that doesn't have to be perfect, right? I've learned to stop being perfect anymore and show them that, yes, it hurts. Yes, this is isn't what I wanted for you. But also, look how far we've come, to your point.
Yeah, and it goes back to like being human.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, and something I'm working on and keeping told is you're human. And from the business standpoint, it was like, no, I'm a machine. This is how I run this. And it's like, the machine will break because we're human. We're not machines. And do you think that like, did it take you then onto a spiritual path? Did you see yourself as kind of this mother, raising 2 kids? How old were they? Or how
3
old
and 6. They're 9 and 12 now.
Yeah, to now saying, okay, well, what's for me?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I think immediately, I knew that I would, I've always, in my way, and I say this to my son Harry all the time, there's always a way. There's always a way, right? Now, there's not a way to change somebody because we don't own people, but there's always a solution to reach your goals and dreams. It may not look the way you want it to. But I had to reinvent myself. And I just got into that mode of, what are you going to do with this? What are you going to do with this? And all of a sudden, doors started opening and people were coming into my life, like Nicole. Relationships were forming that I never thought would happen. I'm spending more time in other places that I really wanted to go. Now I was already on a spiritual path, but before you know it, I land in this place called Santa Teresa, Costa Rica, which has become a second home to me. And I've done a lot of healing there. And since then I've been able to take people there through the company and give them this experience of oneness, of nothingness, of all of the things that we have here in this town, and the luxuries and they're beautiful. It's amazing. It's a tool, right? It's a tool. And I've been fortunate enough that through life experiences and life events, I've been able to get to places like Santa Teresa. I've been able to go surfing. I've done like some wild sports that I never thought I would do. Only to not because I felt that that was achievement. It was more expression and understanding who I am. And the spiritual path just continues to grow. And, I then before you knew it, I was introduced to psychedelic medicine and changed my life.
And I definitely want to go into psychedelic medicine, but before I go back, you said healing. Do you think the healing comes back to what you brought up to begin with, which was single mom raised, and that kind of leading you on a certain belief system or pattern that you had to deconstruct?
1,000%. And I've done a lot of work on that, a lot, and I think abandonment was like the biggest thing, right? And then I learned to be conditioned to it. And so because I was conditioned to having to fend for myself in a lot of ways, it led me down a path of almost immediate financial success out of college on my own. It led me down a path of living in places I never thought I would. And then in my marriage, some of those same trends were showing up and patterns. And even since my marriage, 2 relationships that I've had, same trends. It's like if it wasn't abuse, if it didn't smell like abuse, I didn't want it, right? And abuse is not necessarily like all the things that you think of, but what I learned is if something hurts, if the behavior hurts from someone else, what I would do is say, Alex, that hurts me. And then I would lean on you to correct it. What I learned over time through Al-Anon for spiritual healing is that hurts. Get off the exit. So telling myself that hurts, right? And giving boundaries. Whereas what I've found, especially in my recent relationship, which wasn't necessarily on terms that I agree with or am proud of, but I was almost grasping for approval and love because that's what I had always wanted from like my mother, from my husband, even though I was receiving it in certain ways, maybe not the way I thought it was. And so what I've learned is I am lovable, and learning to love myself was what I really needed to work on so that I could ease the vigilancy in myself, the hypervigilancy, so that I could ease the anxiety, so that I could ease the need for other people loving me to make me feel whole.
I can relate a lot to that. And I think, as you said, it's patterns. But the crazy thing about patterns is they can show themselves in such a different way, right? So it's like, it's not the same person, but it's the same pattern, right? And you're doing things differently, but it's repeating in the same pattern. You're like, well, that doesn't make sense because it's a totally different person, but you're creating that pattern of like you just said, the way you want to be treated and then the response. And it's tricking you because you're like, it looks so different.
Yeah. And especially attachment styles, right? I think we touched on that when we had coffee the other day.
Yeah.
I'm attachment anxious, as I'm not going to use the F word, but you know what I'm saying? Like I am attachment anxious as they come, and I'm working on that. I've almost evolved to attachment disorganized because I'm like, which one am I? Like I'm the leader. I'm not. But I've always been attracted to people who are attachment avoidant. And it almost, in my mind, can just make me absolutely nuts. Like people have seen the ugliest parts of me because that anxiousness, that little girl who just wanted like the physical touch or the love, or, I won't go too deeply into it, but who just wanted someone's time from her parents. And, I think that it all starts to surface, all that therapy, hundreds of $1,000s of therapy later, I'm able to articulate, what that was looking like.
Yeah, because you get to a point in your life where once you recognize the pattern, you don't want it anymore, or it's kind of destroying you, right? Like it literally will destroy you. You have to say, okay, how do I fix this? And then you got to go within, which is the hardest part, especially from people who are used to solving things with their brain. But you're talking about kind of doing inner child work and going back and kind of rewiring it all, which is really tough. Even as you said it, like 2 other more relationships where it showed it. And it's almost like it's a continual lesson. What are the practices then that you've put in to say, okay, I'm feeling like, okay, I'm on the right track not to recreate the pattern?
Sure. First thing is therapy and good therapy. And I think that there are lots of great therapists out in the world, but I think an intensive therapy session, like a week long, whether you go to somewhere like on-site, which I've been to, I would recommend that to anyone, even if you're looking self-curious. I think that having your therapist come and do an in-home, like I did this one with this amazing therapist in town. She came in, we did a poster, we wrote down the various traumas and things, and then I would go back through and relive them and relive them and relive them until it no longer had meaning, which is a very parallel metaphor to meditation or yoga. It's learning to no longer or be aware of operating between polarities. This hurts so much, or I go over here and it's so low, or what goes up must come down, whether it's a stimulant, a relationship, desire, moving more toward that center line of it no longer means anything to me. And here's where I've learned from it, and look how far I've come. And so the therapy, 1,000%, yoga is my medicine all damn day. I've always been into, foods that are helpful. So I've done that. I'm very aware of like what I put into my body. And when I don't do that, sometimes that can dysregulate me. Psychedelic therapy is super helpful, but I would say the biggest, is leaning into my relationship with God, spirit, divine, right? Full surrender.
Yeah, faith. Yeah, we've talked about, everything you've just mentioned is what we keep relaying and relaying with guest after guest on the show. A belief in a greater power or religion, feeling like you're enough, that belief that you're enough, and recognizing patterns, or, we've said it too, it's traumas, right? And it's not to go to a sad place, but everyone has had traumas in their life. If you haven't, you're as rare as it gets.
Sure.
Don't care what background you come from. I think what we implore on the audience is like, if you can just face and admit, okay, this was a traumatic event that happened in my life, and maybe just open up to the idea of what have you been protecting around that traumatic event that you probably don't really want to admit to yourself. You really don't want to admit to yourself. I think that's the start, because you can notice a little pattern just from the fact. I used to say, when I didn't even think about spirituality or anything like this, my protection method was I overwork because I came from a privileged background and I don't want anyone to think I was silver spooned. It's a really soft approach to overworking, right? It's kind of like, oh, that makes sense. But it was so much deeper than that, right? It was a great fear that I wouldn't be safe unless I could control my environment, because when I was 12 years old, I went to boarding school and I was thrown in to a situation I had no control over throughout the rest of my life, that didn't make me feel safe, that then I built a life around safety. Also, your parents, and I don't need to go into, there was an episode with my mom recently, but your relationship with mom or dad certainly affects it. And traumatic, if you've lost a family member, if you've dealt with someone in your family with addiction, if you have addiction, if all these things create the pattern that you're protecting around. And at some point it controls your life. And what's so scary about that, what I've learned, what you've shared, is if that is your life, it can change in minutes. And if you haven't worked around that, that's when the rug is kind of pulled out.
It is. And the rug being pulled out isn't a terrible thing, right? It's sometimes the universe, spirit, God, life force, whatever you refer to it as, has to make hard jolts to wake you up and to throw you into situations that will cause you to wake up, which is what we're talking about. Waking up, going internal, going, oh, it's scary in there. My best friend from college, she comes to yoga and I ask her to like close her eyes and go within, and she won't do it. Her eyes are open. I'm like, what is the deal? She said, scary in there. It's like, yeah, I have a lot of friends who are like, I don't want to go deep with you. I don't want to go deep with you. And I get that. Like, they're not ready for that yet. And I've had to learn that spiritual leakiness is a real thing. Um, but I agree that like we do want to cover things up. We have medicators, right? Medicators are not just substances, they're behaviors. They're being addicted to toxic feelings or emotions. Like, you've had that relationship where like shoot off a shitty text just to wait for that to come back because it's going to hurt, right? It depends on like where you are, what your wounds are. But for sure, like, man, going inside and looking, it ain't easy. And I've had for sure moments sitting on my back patio, and I told you this the last few years of like, I'm so sick of being in my skin. Like, I'm sick of me, right? And it's like, how could you say that? Gorgeous chin, you healthy bud. That's part of the growing up process. It's part of the waking up process. So our previous versions of ourself must die. And I've been through a lot of deaths.
Yeah,
for sure.
I've heard that the decomposing and it takes time. And I mean, what I've tried to tell myself to kind of calm the storm is find the balance, right? And I think that's what you've built in ritual with community is to say, okay, there's some balance here, hopefully, because you've created that. But going into the psychedelic space, which I'm very fascinated by and love, what have you found in that space that's been also really helpful for you?
Those who have had this experience are going to be in their car or their house and be like, yes. Once you're able to get through the uncomfortable moments, and for some, it could be their first experience, for some, it could be 10 to 20. Once you're able to work through your experience, right? And whatever your intention is, and I highly encourage set and setting, preparation, right? This isn't something you just walk into a buddy's house and like, take 5 grams of mushrooms. This is something you prepare for. You prepare your body, prepare your spirit. You know who you're working with. You know your aftercare, your integration. So all that aside, that's just my preface is once you've seen the light, and by light, I'm not saying someone in a white robe, or maybe that's what it is for you. But the light, once you get there, you get into this place where some may refer to as dharma dhatu or complete thoughtlessness or thoughtlessness, but you're everything and nothing at once. And you get this feeling of floating in space, and that's a feeling that you can tap into when you want to. And through that, I think I was able to neutralize all of the chatter in my brain. I was able to rework some of the pathways in my brain that felt trauma and replace them with divinity, with true oneness and love, because that's all we are, all of us. We are love. We were born from love, but we're not perfect. And if we were, it'd be really boring.
Yeah, and so you're talking about almost using psychedelics, whether it may be mushrooms or other, to kind of help awaken what's being held deep within you.
Awaken it. It removes the ego, right? And so once you get deep enough, the subconscious is no longer operational and you're shown what you're shown, right? And with great support and environment, it's really easy to look at things. So for example, a lot of people will say, oh my God, I went to the snake's mouth, right? A lot of people, it's like the metaphorical entry into, gotta go in, it's gonna be scary. And I have a really great shaman that I always say, go, Kalene, pause. What is that? Look again. Like I would see something uncomfortable. Look again. Is it scary? Or is it love? And then all of a sudden it may or may not change shape, right? And so now I'm in my mind able to make these synapses and retrain my brain that not everything from your past or your future was bad. And being able to look at it again and go, okay, I can learn from that. And the end of it, all it is love.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. It just triggered something I always used to say, which is I think couples, if they took a bunch of mushrooms or psychedelics once a quarter, maybe, their relationships would be so much stronger because I used to say this, it takes the ego away. All the things that you're holding on to, each side's really holding on to, it loosens it. And that's not to say like after you got a perfect relationship, but it kind of resets the wheel a little bit.
A beautiful form of intimacy, right?
Yeah.
We know intimacy is not just the obvious. Intimacy is being able to go deep and talk about these things. And I know friends, I've done it with partners in the past. I have friends, married couples who do it. It's changed their lives. I have two friends in particular who independently began psychedelic medicine, and now they are leading a huge ibogaine initiative because I don't know if you've noticed in the news, but Governor Perry,
Yeah.
the right wing Republican, has seen this evidence that ibogaine can change lives and literally heal you from all kinds of things. But because of that, there's been all this great legislation out there that will now have government funding for vets, American vets, to have this treatment, which costs $10,000. And so because these two humans, my dear friends, had this experience individually with psychedelics, and then together, they've seen the benefits. Their lives had changed so much. Their marriage is beautiful. He's in his feminine, which I love, and like life is just happening. And I love the idea of couples doing this together and friends. I've done it with dear best friends, right?
Well, and it's funny. Yeah. It's like the bringing in the feminine. And when I used to think of intimacy, it had to be sexual. And now when I think about it, it isn't that. It's deep conversations or being soft or like you said, opening up. And you said bringing in the feminine. It's kind of when we had our first conversation that was actually not just walking by each other at ritual or saying, I felt comfortable to share that with you. That was something I was working on. Do you find, because now that you've gone on this spiritual journey, do you think part of the healing too is ritual one, but sharing with, continuing to find ways to, like what you just said, help people who you think could benefit from what I would say is just living an extremely, I don't want to say masculine, but this idea, and almost where you said you came from, right? Because you'll see it in your studio too. There's plenty of people who walk in there, with what may look like the perfect lifestyle. And the eyes don't lie, right? And things don't lie. And thank God for yoga. Thank God for things like this. But I think ultimately this is getting worse with social media and all this. And it's like, so do you find that like this has been a gift and your responsibility or your now calling is to this as well?
1,000%. 1,000% it has. And that's my life's work moving forward, is not necessarily on some grand scale. I believe that it'll all come when it's supposed to, but having conversations with people to let them know that they're not alone. And it comes naturally, right? And I think they start to feel seen. And what I've found is by sharing more of my journey and being honest and authentic, authenticity is the sexiest thing in the world, right? Don't bullshit me or anyone else, right? Be honest. And it doesn't mean you need to go outside and, spray paint, I was suicidal or I went to rehab or whatever. I think it's knowing that the conversation can exist. And what I found is through my gentle honesty, people just appear. Like the day we had coffee, it was like kind of random. We had this conversation and I was so grateful that you were able to trust me with it. And I think that my ability to hold space for you allowed you to, like, even saying it out loud to yourself, I think you had some moments of like, okay. And then you looked at me, you go, when does it end? I wish I could tell you. And I don't think it ever ends. It's this, right? Healing is not linear, and for some of us, we feel more. And maybe that's a self-assignment, but for yourself who has this amazing platform to be open and honest and to have local people in the community to come in and share their success lends itself to more of this conversation being spoken about, because I think it's been taboo for a long time. And to your point, social media, AI, which I'm not quite sure about, I think the more we can discuss healing and the more people don't feel alone and they don't sit in the shit alone, laying on the floor in your bathroom, which has happened to me quite a bit. There's this author, and not to digress, this author named Byron Katie. I don't know if you've heard of her. She has a similar story to a lot of us, and she references being on her bathroom floor, thinking she was such a piece of whatever that, like, she didn't even deserve to be like a roach on the floor, right? It's that rock bottom death of ego. And now she's one of the greatest, like, healers and influencers out there in terms of giving you agency. Sorry, I'm rambling, but agency to like grow, right? And it's like the lotus flower. You go in the mud to come out beautiful. And then when you realize it, they're the same.
Yeah, and you're not rambling. It's so true. It's this idea versus reality, which is so powerful, but it's hard, right? So it's easy to sit in this idea of this is exactly what I wanted, this is where I wanted to be, and this reality now of, okay, no, this is where I'm at, and how do I grow from it? And you're right, you do have to go through the mud to come out the other side. But the argument I would make, and again, what I keep telling the audience is like, how long are you going to sit in something that doesn't feel right and protect around it, as opposed to making a hard choice, getting to a happy place? And I think while I sit in this chair and you sit in the chair, is like, we didn't necessarily have, I don't want to say I necessarily had the choice. Mine was a life event or two life events. Sometimes it is a life event to force you into it. But I also think if you're open to just looking for things that have created this or the signs, you can save it before it ruins a relationship or a marriage or your health, right? Talk about health, right? I think a lot of people, we've had someone with ALS who said, wasn't genetic how he got ALS, right? Or different diseases because of blockage and all that stuff. Yeah, it's a sign that this was meant for you. By being so open about it and by having the space, I imagine you have a lot of people that come to you for advice.
Yes and no. I don't know how to answer that question, but I would say I have a lot of conversations such as this. And one of the biggest lessons that I have had to learn is self-protection, right? And not because your energy is bleeding into mine and it's going to make me sick, right? It's not that. I think the awareness of empathy versus compassion, which I heard your mother speak about, not giving so much of yourself in a loving way, especially in intimate and friendship relationships, that it's taken advantage of. Because when you have gone through this, you learn to hold an extreme amount of love. Have you felt that for certain things, like your artwork, right? You're like Harry and I have a plant in the living room. It's called Michelle. Like I feel like I look at Michelle differently, or I look at friends differently, or I look at a room in my home differently. Sometimes we look at other people that we love and we almost give ourselves away. And one of the biggest lessons I have learned, especially in intimate relationships, is not giving too much of myself away, because this heart is huge, right? There's a lot in there. And because of that, it can be a sad and lonely place. And having boundaries of self-protection is first things first. It's first. And then being able to say, okay, I'm not going to bleed over into your issue. I'm able to give you the space to speak if you want. Thank you for being honest. And thank you for giving me agency to share.
I mean, it's like quietly powerful. That's exactly how you took. I mean, I was walking on the trail, ran into you and Blair, who does yoga, and I sat for a coffee, and I was planning to sit for 10, I don't know, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And we sat for an hour, and I just felt comfortable sharing what was on my chest that I needed to get off. And you held it so well. And I think with sharing with people, it's like, you find someone that can just listen. It's just that one little conversation can spark some, A, a relief, right? Because someone's like, oh, I see you. B, you're not alone. And just forward movement, right? Because I guess, again, because you have this community and you have this studio. And it's such a great opportunity for people to release, right? But then as the lights come back on, or as you walk out the door, it's all right, back to kids, back to work, back to the grind, back to the hamster wheel, I'll call it, right? What I've tried to learn is that how do you take space after that and bring it into your present day, right? And be present.
What do you do for that?
And so, yeah, what I guess I'm asking you, right, is like, for someone who's like, well, I want to close my eyes in yoga and drop in, or look, this sounds a little bit too forward for me, all where you're at, but let me do a little step. Let me do a baby step, right? Let me baby step into this because I find myself scrolling on Instagram 24/7, or I don't know how to stop working and I use yoga or this workout as my, I'm slowing down for an hour. But I think a lot of these things are just acceptable disassociatives.
Yeah. Distractions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
distractions.
Distractions are amazing and they come in all forms, from Instagram scrolling to sexual addiction to, excuse me, to gossip to whatever, over exercising, drugs, alcohol. There are a lot. There are a lot of ways to distract. And it becomes sickness, right? You have to be willing to choose to change. In some cases, you're broken open with a gunshot wound to the chest, but learning to accept that over time. But for other people who are currently in a very comfortable state, right? Where you're, to your point, how long are you going to live like that? How long are you going to do this? When they're ready. Like, their timeline and our timeline are totally different. And it's frustrating for people like us, right? Especially if you are single and you're looking for your partner, especially if you see a friend who you want to help, and then that codependency kicks in. You're like, let me help you. Let me fix it. They're not ready.
Yeah.
And I think learning how to step back from those boundaries is painful. But I hear you. Like, you leave yoga or you leave your amazing home, right? Where you're quiet and you can be zen and, or you're with your child or your dog and you're happy. And you're like, this is me. This is grounded. And then I walk out and get in the car and I get like someone honking at me in the car or whatever. Like, I get a phone call that I don't want. That's in duality, right? So internal love and peace. And then the actual physical world that we have to live in, that's called duality. What we're working toward is what Buddhists call, or some lineages of philosophical or religious thought, is what they call dharma dhatu, which is duality, non-duality, and being able to catch ourselves in that moment of, you're at a party, like I used to do, the party's never going to end, tomorrow's never coming. Being able to catch yourself and go, okay, got to go, right? I've got to come together. That's a very high level, shallow example. But excuse me, it could be, so I'm doing this meditation program, and when I'm at home, I can get to that light, to that thoughtlessness. And then I go out in the world, or I see an Instagram photo of a girl I really love, and I'm like disgusted. Not that they're wrong. I'm like, what world am I living in? Stop, pause, look at the thought, let it dissolve, and go back to duality, non-duality, and just everything is phenomena. And I think that I did an excellent job of assigning emotion to everything, right? Logical thinking didn't exist in my life until the last 120 days or maybe more, but everything was emotional. And I was assigning so much meaning to every event. That's a really hard place to live. And then to your point, those who are living in a logical world, hiding and no longer thinking or not even exploring the opportunity to go deeper. And so finding that balance and learning how to regulate, dysregulate that sun and that moon and getting more towards the center is what we're working on. And I think these conversations are a reminder of nothing is permanent. If it's awful this morning, it's not going to be so bad. If you're having a great day, tomorrow could be different. Just check your center, right?
And because we've brought it up a lot on the show with inner child, what do you think today's Kalene is telling the little girl, and what age is that little girl?
Good question, because that little girl is still there. I would say she's definitely like at pre-adolescence, right? It's that true essence of desire or want to be loved by external forces. And frequently when I get into this stage of, I work a lot, I have the kids, thank God I'm an amazing mother, by the way, to 2 amazing kids. They're like the joy of my life. I feel overwhelmed, and then I stop and I go, okay, you get to do these things. And the little girl in me who wants to lash out and be sad because the relationship that I wanted or am looking for isn't here. Because I'll be honest, being a single mom is not all guns and roses. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a lonely place to carry that emotional responsibility and then get in bed at night, even though I get to choose the Netflix or Harry will snuggle with me. It can be tough. And even if you're in a relationship, that person, at least in my value system, is not there when I have my kids. And so that little girl inside of me has to constantly be like, okay, you're strong. You're not a child, right? You don't have to be sad about this. How can we accept this? Or if you are sad, feel it, let it go.
Interesting. And you bring up lonely. My mom was on the show. She was on the past one, but she talks about being lonely. And she's had 4 boys and a husband for the past, 50 years plus. And she was saying to me, lonely is like, you can be lonely and still be in a relationship. You can be lonely and be in a marriage. You can be lonely and have kids. That's something that never registered with me. I was like, well, if you have this person, how could you be lonely? Like you just said, you got your kids. I'm intrigued by that. What does that look like when you have people around you? And not go back to the marriage, but if you look back at that, would you might say you were still lonely in that space, or maybe there wasn't loneliness in there?
I think it ebbs and flows. No relationship is perfect, right? Loneliness can present in all forms, right? Like I can see my kids in their rooms almost feeling lonely, right? It's like if something's not balanced in your life, whether you have maybe you and Elliot or Dom are like on the outs, maybe, you saw something earlier in the day that triggered something within your inner child, right? Loneliness can be a derivative of just about anything. And I think oftentimes it's whatever is outside of ourselves that we're looking for to make us whole. And for me, for a long time, it has been external love from other people and the wrong kind.
Yeah. And then when that safety blanket or that comfort gets taken away, it can rock you.
Rock you. And thank God it did.
So you have a good attitude about it.
Thank God it did. For a long time, I didn't, And I think there's some of us, especially if it's coming, like you can feel it. You're like, oh God, there's another wave of this coming. And then you just like, okay, I'm going to ride it. But I think some of us, especially in the communities that we operate in, there have been days where I've gone to ritual literally dying inside, right? But you put on a smile and you hug, right? And then over time, I realized I'm going to share a little of this, right? And as a teacher and instructor, it's important not to make this about you. And I've had a couple people challenge me on that. But in my mind, me giving you a 2-sentence personal story about struggle and pain is not going to make you think that I'm being, it doesn't make me feel like I'm being egotistical. What I'm saying is it hurts. And on the other side of it is joy. And just be in it. You're in a safe space.
I love it. I could raise my hand right now and say the same. I have walked into ritual because there wasn't a hole that I wanted to stay in my house, right? And I'm like, better get to ritual. I've walked into ritual, not a lot, where I was scared, like I was like, I feel like I'm in a trap almost, but I was like, I got to get to ritual. That's how small my space got. And I left it and I'm like, wow, I'm glad I got there. I'm glad there were people around me. I'm glad that I did that. And because they say exercise, yoga can move energy and which it does. But I'm here to say the same thing. And this is my vulnerability and literally what you shared. It's like, it isn't always perfect. There are days that are just brutal, right? And I think when you walk in as a teacher and say that, it kind of gives space to the room. It's like, okay, we all here. Like, again, it all puts us on the same playing field. Because at some point you're like, well, this teacher is incredible. And look what they're doing. Look how great they are. And look, and it's like, everyone's telling you everything, right?
Yeah, that's not my value system anymore. It was for a while. Perfection is no longer in my value system. And if I forget part of a sequence, or if someone's like, especially in yoga, a lot of us have been practicing a long time. We've known each other for a couple decades. And one of them, they'll be like over there doing accounting. I'm like, great for you. Like, I no longer care, right? we'll figure it out later in the moment. And there were days, years where I would panic inside and be flustered. Now, do I encourage my teachers to go in there and be like, I have nothing good to say? Like that? No. I think it's okay to be able to collect yourself, share a little something. Or if you're having a great day, like, I feel so much joy today because, you know?
Well, I just feel I could add, you learn so much from people who've gone through stuff. So I'm listening to the yoga instructor tell me something that applies to my life. You know, for the most part, I'm not being rude. It's not 19-year-olds telling us about their lives, right?
And I've got a few that are actually pretty good about it, right? And I think there's a balance.
Well, they can bring young and kind of this, you know, kind of the playful energy too. So I backtrack on that. But yeah, it's all helpful. We always donate to a charity of choice. So what charity would you like the podcast to donate to?
That's wonderful. The 24-Hour Club here in Dallas is a special place to me. Are you familiar?
No.
It's kind of a last-ditch effort for people who are homeless, who are drug addicted, or alcoholics. They have it's down on not the design district, downtown, like Ross Street, and it's privately funded. A lot of really amazing people here in Dallas are supporters, and I think it's an incredible place. You know, my father's 40 years sober. You know, I've gone back and forth on the Al-Anon, AA, Alateen. I've been all of it, right? And to see people at rock bottom and there's a place for them to go, no questions asked. 24-Hour Club.
Love that. And I think that resonates exactly with what this podcast is about, is helping people who
no questions asked.
I have one last question.
Please.
Because you brought up your father again.
I love him.
I feel like so much of our lives is so pattern driven, and so much from moms and dads. And I think from a male, it's looking at your mother so many times and saying, this is from those wounds. And from a female, it's a lot of times from the father. How do you handle that? Have you had a discussion with him to release certain things, or?
I have. We've had a lot. I would say he was largely unavailable as a child, and then he wanted to like grasp and be involved in my life in my 20s. Even when I had my daughter, it was kind of there. And then when my son was born, I'm his only child. I mean, it was like the world changed, right? He had a grandson. And I really allowed him to become more involved. And before I knew it, I was able to see him in a way that I hadn't been able to see him in the past. And also, now that I'm a single mother, I allowed him to step in as a support role. Whereas before I was so strong, I could do this, I can do this. Now, do we speak the same language in terms of like his jokes? No, because there was a fair amount of my life where I suffered as a matter of his jokes. But do I believe he is goodness, light, and love? Yes. Because he taught me to teach peace, to be peace. Am I, to use the word derivative again, of his DNA to carry this work? Yes. I will do what he can't do. I will do what he started, and Harry will do the same.
And so
I believe that.
So do you feel like you're in service to that?
1,000%. And I see it in my son, and I have people who know him see it, like Kids Connected. And it's just inexplicable to be able to look at your bloodline and go, okay, it all makes sense now. And for him, he knows, and we have had conversations, like, I am angry with you that you chose addiction recovery over me as a child. And you knew that I won't use the word abuse, but you knew that I was being mistreated at home. And he said to me, I knew it. But I knew you were strong enough to get through it. And if I weren't married to my addiction recovery, I wouldn't be here right now. Done.
And that shows you've probably healed a lot to get to that space and say that. Tremendously.
He's a cool dude. Really cool dude. He baptized my son in the pool. You know, he's just taught me it ain't always easy, but just be easy.
I love it. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Special.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Alex Perry on Fire. It means so much to me and the wonderful team that makes this all possible. I'm now passing the flame to you. Please follow, like, and subscribe so you can always stay up to date. Thanks again, and stay fired up.